Greetings, everybody, and hello. Hope everybody's having a wonderful day. Um, I'm here to provide a truth and a light that has been kept in the dark for obvious reasons. It's very powerful and very saddening and angering and vile. But once we know, we can do our own research, we can correct the record, and at all times we can convey, preventative measures through critical thinking, through conquering our fears, which is just false evidence appearing as real, through verifiable fact, knowledge, and information, and by exercising our rights and our conscience on a daily basis in all business, that we conduct. However, we so choose. And look, we could look at all the info. I'll provide it all in the chat or the comments below. Or as I would recommend, you do a mixture of both. You come to your own conclusions, truths and understandings based on the information I'm going to convey to y'all, and then just going and doing your own due diligence and research on the subject. I've been on this path for about 6-7 months now, and basically it's all led me to a realization and to a truth and understanding about sovereignty, about who we are. We're a self-governing nation, and what that means is that I decide what I eat. I decide what I drink. I decide who to follow, who to believe, whether, speaking of a religion or speaking of, a man on this earth or a woman on this earth. Um, I decide if I want to lead or, if something's going into my body or mind or soul. And basically, as long as I do no harm or trespass towards another or their rights or property, and I give them the same courtesy, I'm standing in honor and truth and I've done no wrong. And that means that basically I'm not subject to the color of law, the rules of others. Because that's their conscience to decide if they want to, go along with those rules and regulations or not. So, excuse me. I guess you could say I become somewhat of a scholar. I used to spend my time working 40 to 60 hours a week. Come home for a few hours, just go get out of the house, go get some dinner, some lunch, hang out with a few friends, maybe go see a movie. Um, a lot of pointless stuff that really does nothing for you but provide, a little bit of gratitude. Oh, I'm getting out of the house, but it doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't teach you anything. You know, it's nice to watch sports and to talk about them and to play them, but at the end of the day, besides the exercise that you're getting, it really does nothing for you. It's a big distraction from all the stuff that's really going on and that really impacts our life. Our financials, our property, our freedoms, our community and our neighborhood. We're slowly seeing all the infrastructure and people's rights get, even more and more deteriorated. And I just want to provide some perspective on that. And basically now, I just spend all my free time, reading and communing, having conversations like this, uh, reading old history, old books, international laws, treaties, declarations, constitutions, the difference in jurisdictions, the different types of structures of government, our government, which is outformed by the people, the American government, the U.S. government, which is Washington, D.C. A lot of people don't even think or realize that just like Italy and the Vatican have nothing to do with each other, they're both separate and foreign with regards to each other. The same thing applies with the states of the Union, which is America, and Washington, D.C. So I know I didn't know this. I'm sure most people don't know, but most people, well, I guess and I'm sure most people don't realize, like I said, I never knew that there was multiple jurisdictions. I've heard the word jurisdiction, in movies and random times from, police and things like that, but I never really knew what it meant. Um, I figured it just meant like, I guess you could say like a scope of, like a zoning of authority. And it kind of does mean that, but it's so much bigger. Um, Basically, jurisdiction, is the laws. So laws is an acronym. There's the land, L, which actually makes up the land and soil. And that makes up all things actual, factual, and tangible. So the land and soil, beneath our feet, all minerals, all property, our bodies, our property rights over our animals, our cars, our homes, our bodies, our actual assets. We have the air jurisdiction, which is it's a global jurisdiction, and that contains all thoughts, ideas, information, corporations, commerce, which is actually business between two or more incorporated entities. So as a living person, I actually cannot participate in commerce because I'm alive. I don't have a board of directors. I don't have a secretary. I don't have standing in the global air jurisdiction. The global air jurisdiction makes up ecclesiastical law, which is, like the old laws of the churches, patents, trademarks, basically all intellectual property, which is all intangible, immaterial property, things that you can't put in your hands. The create, I guess you could say, creation of thought, So I can only participate in lawful trade, not commerce, through my lawful person, because that's the name, that's my property right. So that's still on the land and soil jurisdiction. And it's not a legal entity. It's not a legal person because I'm not a corporation. My name is a lawful person. And then there's the law of the sea or the water, which is all about, going to and fro among many nations. It contains all international laws, for trade, for vessels, for the military, and for war, basically. And then the new jurisdictions of space, which obviously we know that's everything, above the air. And that's kind of a new jurisdiction. So, but regardless, we know we're not in space right now. So basically what happened, y'all, is at birth, we were trafficked into a foreign jurisdiction. Our identity was stolen and we were impersonated. We were pretended to have left the land and soil, basically, where we have all our property rights as landlords of anything and everything in our names and our family's names and in our possession and our family's possession. And we were pretended to have left that land and soil for the sea, where we have zero rights. There are zero property rights in that water jurisdiction. So we were basically misrepresented and mischaracterized as British territorial citizens, as Puerto Rican government employees under the auspices of the monarch and the Lord Mayor of London, because these are the principals, which means the highest, basically, like the CEO of Walmart would be their principal agent. He's the head agent. So basically, when it comes to our constitution, our municipal and territorial constitutions, we have three principles. So with the territorial constitution, which is for the military, and for all things done in the laws of the sea or the water, our principal agents are the Queen and the Lord Mayor of London. And for the municipal jurisdiction, which is the global jurisdiction of the air, our principal agent is the Pope, believe it or not. And basically, any corporations that are acting in that global jurisdiction of the air are under the auspices of that Pope. So that means that, he's their boss, basically. He's like, he's their sovereign. You're basically an employee or a servant or a dependent of that principle. And if you're a territorial employee or dependent, they're basically claiming that you're an employee or dependent of the Queen and the Lord Mayor of London. So what they did was, they basically said that, We left the land and went to sea where we were lost at sea. And, they basically falsified and published uh, public records on both us and our families that were never given full disclosure on these contracts. And basically that amounts to, it's what's called an unconscionable contract, meaning, it's null and void. It's totally illegal and unlawful. So, um, as a British territorial citizen, like I was saying, because you're under the auspices of the Queen, you're not sovereign in your own right. You're basically working for someone who the people, believe it or not, hired to provide with service. So if you're, you know, technically providing service to the people, you can't be considered one of the people. So it's very simple and evil, but that's pretty much how they've taken our rights and our property and our names and our freedoms, and they've kind of forced us into being employees of ourselves under the principals who are still under us. It's a big fraud scheme, but it just brings into perspective each and every situation we go into. Um, you know, we see all sorts of situations with our brothers and sisters where they're improperly and unjustly treated by, you know, service providers that we've hired to provide us with certain services and good faith, and you know, basically they use a lot of propaganda and division and picking sides and to make us argue amongst each other and to take us on all these tangents and rabbit holes. But the truth and the fact of the matter is, you know, if we haven't committed harm or trespass on another's property or rights, and obviously, their body would be their property, and so would their car, and so the property and rights pretty much take care of everything. As long as we haven't harmed another's property or rights, we haven't done any harm and we haven't committed any trespass. But since we're being mislabeled as employees and not as we the people, well, employees have rules, regulations, codes, policies, procedures, duties, obligations. I mean, the list goes on. They have all these things that they have to comply to. And, we the people, all we have is our rights and our exemptions. And, when we go to work for another, that's when we sacrifice some of those rights, and exemptions for duties and obligations and, codes and policies and procedures and regulations and rules and all these other things. But even when we've given up our rights, we haven't really given them up. We might have signed a contract saying we'll do something else, but in reality, even if that contract goes against our rights and our beliefs and causes us to trespass on another's rights or property, whether ours or another's, it's still an unconscionable contract. So that one stipulation, believe it or not, is it's called color of law, meaning, even though it has the face and the appearance and the look and the sound and the form of law, it really doesn't exist. And, because it doesn't exist, it provides no authority, it provides no obligation, it provides no immunity, it provides no liability. So it's clear to see how they're using this color of law to, force both us and our neighbors to basically destroy each other's lives on a daily basis. And we're seeing it, with the masks and with everything going on, with the vaccines, with pretty much anything we're seeing it go on where we have others trespassing on our rights, on our beliefs, on our conscience. And, they just have no right to do that. You know what I'm saying? You have the right to choose for yourself, but you have no right to force those beliefs on others. And it's very easy to see that when we know what rights we have. So, first thing I want to do is It's crazy because, the Declaration of Independence is what gave us our freedom. And when I say gave us our freedom, obviously I mean it gave Americans, all Americans who are part of a State of the Union, it gave us all our sovereignty in our own right. And, I wonder if people know who they were actually fighting, in the American Revolution. Because if we know that they were fighting, the Pope and the monarch and the Lord Mayor of London, it's easy to see that what we're doing now doesn't really make sense. Why do we see the Queen and the Pope walk in the streets and we hold parades for them? Why do we kiss their hands and their feet? Um, why do we care what they say or think about, certain laws? We shouldn't. Clearly we had families and friends and neighbors and people we never knew, who fought, died, gave up their life, their freedom, their homes, everything they had just to cement that declaration in truth, and in history. And basically what that was them leaving that tyranny, them leaving people saying, "Hey, you know what? Even though I'm never on your land, even though I never work for any of your family businesses, even though I never work your farms, even though I'm not involved in your day-to-day life whatsoever, I still want you to pay me taxes and bow to me and follow my rules." And that's just not what free people do. So it's clear to see that, that stuff is still going on today. So they've kind of flipped the script on us. And if we knew, who we were and what we were born with and what our duty was, most of these problems I don't think would be going on. And, it's both not our fault, but it is our fault. It's not our fault in that, we've been indoctrinated from birth. Think about it. We go to a place where 40 hours a week we sit in a chair. We go to the bathroom when someone else allows us to. We get up and eat when someone else allows us to. Our whole life is a schedule, and it all revolves around, those 2 days of freedom. Oh, finally, we got 2 days of freedom. But, most people work on a Saturday or a Sunday, or, have so much going on, or they're so dead from work, or, they have so much to catch up on that they don't even live in those days. And, when they are working, what do? They're paying 20 to 40% of their check away before they've even spent a dollar of it. And then the rest of their check goes towards a mortgage, which you could look up the word mortgage. It actually means debt or death grip in Latin. They got us paying for insurances and permits and registrations and all these things, all these things that we don't ask. We don't say, why do we need this? We don't say, what's the purpose of this? We don't say, where's the law that says we actually need to do this? And if we did, we would realize very quickly that there are no laws that require us to do any of these things. There are rules and regulations and codes and policies and procedures. And, we know now that all these things only apply to some type of employee. So if you're not working in some capacity, or for a certain, business or a certain corporation, why should these things apply to a blanket, to all of us? So I just want to, most people don't know what their unalienable rights are that were endowed not from government, but from their creator. We're born with these rights. We're all equal under the law. And what that means is that, we're all part of the creation. So whatever you believe the creator is, whether you think it's a something or a he or a she or an it or whatever you think, that's your right to believe. It really doesn't mean, matter to me regardless. But what does matter to me is that we all know that we're all equal under the law. We're all equal under the land, the air, and the water. All those laws apply equally to us. And we're all born with certain unalienable rights. And, what the word unalienable means, I would really appreciate it if y'all would look it up, but I've already done it. If you look up the word unalienable, the law definition, it means impossible to take away or give up. Impossible to take away or give up. Unalienable. And we've heard that in the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence. They say, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, certain rights that are impossible to take away or give up. And among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And there's many more, so I just want to go through some of those unalienable rights. Basically, unalienable rights are the inherent, sovereign, natural rights that existed before the creation of government, and which, being antecedent to and above government, can never be taken away. It could never be diminished. They could never be altered, and they could never be liened or contracted upon by the state, which is the government, subject only to the due process of the common law. Common law, right? Common sense for the common man or woman, for the common day-to-day. You know what the common law is? Asking questions. Oh, you say Bubba hurt, Bubba? Well, what are their names? What were they doing? Oh, yeah? Why were they there? Oh, okay. Well, how did they end up there? How did they get into that situation? Oh, okay. So where did the situation actually escalate? Who was the first one to instigate this argument or instigate this fight? Who created that first trespass? Not who broke a rule or a regulation that had nothing to do with them, that you're claiming applies to them, without any verifiable fact. What actually happened? What's the full scenario? What's the full situation? So that's what they've been teaching us, to just not think about any of this stuff. When we see all these things happen and no one asks any of these questions, people just, it's all about stereotype, prejudice, pick a side. And, we're not supposed to be picking sides. We're supposed to be standing in honor and in truth. And we're supposed to be speaking on the full situation, the complete situation, every side of it. And that's what the common law is. Like I said, it's common sense. And when you ask questions, answers come. It's very simple. So, nor can any unalienable right be fundamentally removed, whether mistakenly by contract through non-disclosure, or, which is fraud and unenforceable in law, or knowingly by renunciation, which is contrary to natural law. The original permanent, unalienable rights of every man and woman include, so we have the right to life, freedom, health, and the pursuit of happiness. So we can see that's being broken on a day-to-day basis by most of the people around us. They don't know what they're doing. They're just following the herd. But if they knew what their rights were, and they knew what their neighbors' rights were, they wouldn't be trespassing on them. And we have to get better at, exercising our rights and explaining them to our neighbors in a way that's, unconfrontational. Or, you're still stern, but you still exercise, your rights, and you still help them understand that, hey, this has nothing to do with you. If my pastor was here, or if my, uncle was here, even if they were saying something that went against my beliefs or against my rights, they have no right. So, I appreciate that you think what you're doing is the right decision, but if you're willing to have like a little 2-minute, 5-minute conversation with me, or even read one paper, it's very easy to see that what's going on right now isn't proper. And you are in the wrong. And no problem. 6, 7 months ago, I was there. I was ridiculing my neighbors and fighting with this and fighting with that. We need to stop. We get too personal with things, and we always act as if we've never been there or we've never been on the other side of it. But let's be real. On a day-to-day basis, we learn and we grow, and that's what life's about. It's about having those constructive conversations and team building and critical thinking and becoming more efficient in all walks of life, because we only do live once. So why would we want both ourselves and our neighbors to do the wrong thing in any sense of the word wrong? So we have the right to contract or not to contract, which is unlimited. So let's say I'm traveling down the road. Well, let's not even say that. Let's just say I'm just walking in the street, and some type of service provider, whatever the case, they come and they ask me for information. I have the right to contract with them, and I have the right not to contract with them. As one of the sovereign people, one of the people who employ all service providers, I have the right to decide if I want to, contract with these people or not. And if I choose not to, that's my right. I have the right to earn a living by being compensated with wages or salary or any trade goods in a fair exchange for one's work. We're not supposed to be paying taxes, guys. Not unless we work for the federal government. Because if we make federal income, then we are required to pay federal income tax. But most of us are just paying taxes because we haven't been paying attention. Because ignorance is no excuse of the law. You see, that's what these corporations say. That's how they get away with this. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh, we thought everyone knew. We knew. So that's fine. We're not going to play victim, or attacker. We're just going to make sure that we do our best to educate and to learn and to grow and to, convey this knowledge and share it with everybody. And then from there on, there's just no reason to be misidentified or misrepresented or misconstrued. And there's definitely no reason to be giving away, our family's wealth. Most people don't know this. I certainly didn't know. Now I do. Taxes are completely voluntary. And, I could show you a 2-minute video of the IRS, head officer, which is, remember, just another agent of another corporation. So a guy wearing another Halloween costume that happens to say IRS, you could see him talking about how it's completely voluntary. And I'll provide that underneath because I'm sure there's going to be some people that see this and they let that fear, right, that false evidence appearing real, they're going to let that take over and either scare them or force them to, want to scare others inadvertently, and that's why they've created all these things. We have all these invisible prisons and invisible guards, and most of them end up becoming our neighbors, believe it or not. But all they're doing is living through fear. If they knew the real information, they knew the real truth, that empathy and that efficiency and that clarity would be there, and they wouldn't be standing on the wrong side of the fence. So we have the right to travel in the ordinary course of one's life and business. Okay? We have the right to control and hold one's property lawfully without trespass. Who wants my property? My home, my car, right? My phone, right? My shirt, all these things. We have the right to privacy and confidentiality, free from unwarranted invasion. See, we have these rights, but if we don't know, how do we stand on them? So even if, let's say we're talking to a guy who's got the Halloween costume on, right? He's a public service provider, so he's working for the people. And his, badge, his, costume says police officer. And he tells you, you need to give me your name, you need to give me your address. And you say, why? and he says, well, this code and this regulation. And you can say, that's fine. Codes and regulations are for government employees, which I'm not, but you are. What's your name? What's your address? You see, I'm one of the people. I have the right to privacy and confidentiality, free from unwarranted invasion. See, we don't say these things. Instead, we've been taught to run or argue or comply. And those are all three are basically what the employee in the situation should be doing. And remember, we're not employees. We're the people. We're the employers. We have the right to self-defense when threatened with harm, loss, or deceit. So when someone's taking things from us, harming us, lying to us, we have the right to self-defense. We have to know that. And when we have these rights, we can exercise these rights. Now, that says the right to self-defense when threatened with harm, loss, or deceit. So we can't just instigate a problem and then say, oh, well, they were trying to hurt us. No. We have the right when threatened. We don't have the right to threaten. You see what I'm saying? Those who threaten are the ones who are in the wrong. We have the right to due process of law with notice and opportunity to defend. The right to be presumed innocent, suffering no detention or arrest, no search or seizure without reasonable cause. The right to remain silent when accused to avoid self-incrimination. The right to equality in the eyes of the law, right, of the jurisdictions, and to equal representation. The right to trial by jury, being an impartial panel of one's peers. The right to appeal in law against conviction or sentence or both. The right to expose knowledge necessary to one's rights and freedoms. You see, that's what I'm doing right now. And that's what our job is. You see, it's our duty because we have the right to expose knowledge necessary to our rights and freedoms. So when someone trespasses on our rights, we have the right to bring up that right to them. We have the right to show them that information. We have the right to ask them questions about it. And if they can't prove how we've committed trespass or harm, then they're threatening us with harm, loss, or deceit. See, we have to know these rights so we can stand on them. And remember, these are all men and women. We haven't heard anything about a red or a blue or a green or anything, or a gold or whatever these other colors are. See, these are all the people's rights. Not the government's, remember, the people's. So why are we even voting for a red or a blue or a gold or a green government? Does it really matter who's in that office? As long as we know that we're the employers and it's up to us to hold them accountable? No, it doesn't. See, that's why they flipped the script so much. That's why all this propaganda and all this division and all these, false flags and all these situations. Because it's all about keeping you distracted, running around, loophole after loophole, argument after argument, side after side, potentially worse. Maybe something worse than just an argument. All to keep us from realizing, wait a minute, we're all neighbors, and some people that we hired to do a job are not only not doing that job properly, they're also doing other jobs and, forcing us to pay them more. And because we're not present, because we're not providing the proper direction or checks and balances or oversight or accountability, they're just running rampant. And in addition to that, they keep flipping the script. They're projecting more of their rules and regulations and codes and policies and procedures on us. And now they think that they're the employers, but they're not. They work for we the people, and it's very simple to see. So we have the right to peaceful association, assembly, expression, and protest. The right to practice a religion and to have beliefs of one's choosing. Well, doesn't that mean that if I believe I like boys or dogs, I have that right, as long as I don't harm another or trespass on their rights? You see, why do we have people marching in the street asking for equality when they were born with it? Why do we have people, complaining? And why are people complaining to their neighbors about certain choices that their neighbors make or, think about making or whatever the case? If there's no trespass or harm being done, you have every right to make your own decision. But projecting things on 4-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 5-year-olds, having a 6'5" man in a dress with devil horns, dressed up as the devil, reading to 5-year-olds at a library. These aren't people exercising their freedoms. These are corporations projecting, and sowing division. Because just like I don't have the right to talk to a 5-year-old about sex, I don't have the right to talk to a 5-year-old about drugs. I don't have the right to talk to a 5-year-old about, them not being the gender that they were born. This is something that as they grow up, once they become the age of majority, which is 21, and they're no longer under their parents, basically rule anymore, it's up to them to make those own decisions for themselves. But remember, they're not allowed to, of one's choosing. You're not allowed to project those choices on another, because then you're not providing them that same right or that same freedom that you have. The right to love and to consensual marriage with children as a family. So there you go. The right to love, to consensual marriage. So if you're, two women, you have the right to love, you have the right to consensual marriage. You're a man and a woman, you got the right to love, you got the right to consensual marriage. It's right there. You have the right. You're born with it. You don't need to beg and ask and donate for it and fight with others for it, because you were born with it. The right to security from abuse, persecution, tyranny, and war. See, we have the right to security. We have the right to refuse to kill under command by reason of conscience. You see, even if you're working for the military and they force you, you better go, hey, that's your job, boy, you better do your job, boy. That's not your job, first of all. It might be an order that you're being given in that moment, but that's an unconscionable contract. And you have the right to conscience. So if it goes against your beliefs, hey, he's got no authority. There's no order actually being given. But you're able to see how these things exist and we're born with them. And they're very common sense. If everyone knew them, if everyone knew these since, they were babies. And, we all treated our neighbors' rights as, as important as we treated ours. And as, I guess you could say unalienable, impossible to take or give away. As long as you treat every right unalienable the way it should be, there wouldn't be much confusion with whether we were at a job, ours, or at someone else's. We have the right to live in peace and be left alone when law abiding. So that means as long as we're not harming another, trespassing on their rights or their property, that's it. We're law abiding. So think about how many times you yourself or someone you've known has been put in a situation where a public service provider wearing some type of, badge or costume, whatever you want to call it, one of the people acting as a public servant to provide service to the public, which is we the people, which was them and their neighbor, acting under color of law, right? Something that has the form, the appearance, the sound, the look, everything. It looks like a law, but it's color of law because it goes against these unalienable rights. Or it doesn't have proper standing or authority. It wasn't written by we the people. It was written by an employee of we the people. And it's being projected on we the people, which it was never supposed to be. You see, this is common sense, but we don't even think about this because we're so distracted with the stereotypes and with the arguments and with the colors and with the sides. But in reality, there's only two sides here. You're either one of the people or you're someone being tyrannical against one of the people. It's very simple. So surely the most critical failure of the people is their failure to ensure the teaching and common knowledge of their unalienable rights. If you don't know your rights, you effectively have none. By path of ignorance, whether by apathy, right, by choice, or by deception, the people arrive in a state of exploitation, oppression, and tyranny. So that's why the only way we're going to fix this situation is by teaching each other. Now, not only do you need to know your rights, you also need to know who you are. But before I say that, I just want to show you one paper. So this comes from the American Jurisprudence Encyclopedia on Constitutional Law. So let's say you want to be a lawyer, American Jurisprudence is, American. It's like the dictionary of law for American law. So it's like one of the most important encyclopedias, in American law. So this is probably what they would teach at, the most prestigious schools if you actually had a good teacher or a good class. This is from 16A, American Jurisprudence, Second Constitutional Law, Section 195, generally. The general rule is that an unconstitutional statute, whether federal or state, though having the form and name of law, is in reality no law, but is wholly void and ineffective for any purpose. Since an unconstitutional law is void, it follows that generally the statute imposes no duties, confers no rights, creates no office or liabilities, bestows no power or authority on anyone, affords no protection, is incapable of creating any rights or obligations, does not allow for the granting of any relief, and justifies no acts performed under it. A contract that rests on an unconstitutional statute creates no obligation to be impaired by subsequent legislation. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law. No one is bound to obey an unconstitutional law, and no courts are bound to enforce it. A law contrary to the United States Constitution may not be enforced. That's it. One word, unconstitutional. That right there can change your whole life and change every business dealing in every scenario that we go through. How many situations do we go through where people try and tell us that this applies to us or that applies to us? Rule, regulation, a policy, a mandate, an order, whatever the case. and it's unconstitutional. Did we ever call it out? Did we ever show them this? Did we have, a $10 copy, a $10 copy of our Constitution with us to show them, hey, I know what my 10 rights are. I know my Bill of Rights. That's it. 10 rights. That's it. That's right there. That right there will keep the government from trespassing on all your rights if you know what they are. You know what else will? Section 8. So let's just read Section 8 real quick. Because Section 8, just like Section 8, federal housing, right? There's a reason it's federal housing. It's Section 8. It's Section 8's in the Constitution. That's one of the, enumerated services. This is delegated authority. We the people have all the authority in the land. And we gave certain authority to certain service providers. Remember, 3 of them. The Queen, the Lord Mayor of London, that's the territorial, and the municipal, which is the Pope. So, Section 8, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. That's not America. That's the government. So they can lay taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay their debts to America and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the corporation by taxing, excising, and laying duties on their own employees. To borrow money on the credit of the United States. So they borrow money from Americans on the credit of the corporation. To regulate commerce with foreign nations. And yes, that does mean America and the United States. So they can regulate commerce between us. That's it. And among the several states and with certain tribes. So that's why, the biggest trespass that happens on a day-to-day basis is police officers, which are, remember, just service providers, right? They're our neighbors wearing a badge, wearing a costume, providing service to themselves and their neighbors. They don't put on a badge and become the overlord. They put on a badge to provide service. And they're, like I said, no problem with our neighbors. They're being, just like we're being misidentified and misrepresented, they're being given the wrong information and they're misconstruing it. But if we give them that information, they can't take it the wrong way. And if they do, remember, they're doing it of their own volition. There's no office, there's no position, there's no law saying that they have to. So that's their own conscience, and then they're committing a trespass. So they can regulate commerce. So what's commerce? Remember what I said. Commerce is business between 2 incorporated entities. So if I'm not incorporated, meaning I'm alive, they automatically can't regulate commerce between me and them. But they can regulate commerce, meaning if I incorporate a business, if I incorporate myself, if I incorporate my car, right, by registering it, if I incorporate myself by getting a license. Let me ask you something. When we were reading those unalienable rights, did it say anywhere that I have the right to need a license? A right to need registration? A right to need a permit? Why would you need a license to do anything? Do y'all know what a license is? I would like you to look up the law definition of license. I did. I pulled it up. It says, permission granted by competent authority to engage in a business or occupation or an activity otherwise unlawful. What are the type of licenses you need? Driver's license. Why would driving be unlawful? Don't we have the right to travel? Okay, as Americans we do, but what if we're the government? What if we're someone working for the people? Well, then we don't have the right. Then we have duties, rules, regulations, obligations, codes, right? Then we do need to be granted permission by the authority, right? We gave this corporation authority over, remember, their own employees to provide them with duties, excises, taxes. But now they're portraying that on us. So let's say I'm an officer. I'm one of the neighbors. I'm one of the people, right? With a badge on, playing Halloween. I'm at my job. And I was told anyone with a license has to follow these rules and regulations. Is that wrong? Let me ask you something. Did my boss say anyone who is working for the government with a license and a license plate and registration, those are the people subject to the rules and regulations and codes and policies and procedures? See, they didn't have this conversation. Everything's left up for interpretation. So they just say, yep, anyone with a license. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say that officer who was told anyone with a license stops me because he thinks, oh, you know what? You were going 7 miles over the speed limit that we posted for our own employees. Then he puts his blue lights on, or blue red lights on, which is supposed to be for an emergency. When there's an emergency, when there's a couple injured parties, and people need to watch out for them so they don't commit more injury, more harm. Those are what those lights are for. It's not for, oh, you're going 7 miles over the speed limit, and I'm about to, see what else I could charge you with, including going 7 miles over a limit that I created for my employees. Remember, we're not employees. And if we haven't harmed another, they don't have the right to tell me how fast I can go. I have conscience. I know that if I am going too fast and I can't handle it and I hit another person, either their property or them, I will be liable. This is common sense. I don't need someone to charge me money for, oh, there was a possibility that you could have done something or been involved in something, so I'm going to charge you with money. No, you see, that's not real. This is color of law, and it only applies to them. Why would you actually need a driver's license? Remember, it's permission granted. Why would you need permission to drive? Let me ask you this. Which drivers provide service to the people? Taxi driver, Uber driver, Lyft driver, tow truck driver, right? State trooper, UPS driver, FedEx driver, right? What else? Napa Auto Parts, right? All these people that are working, right? That's a delivery driver. Walmart, Chick-fil-A, delivery driver, right? These people have rules and regulations and codes and policies and procedures because they're working for the people. And when you're working for the people, you're not supposed to be trespassing on the people's rights. That's why you have rules and regulations and codes and policies and procedures. Duties, obligations, all the rest of them, regulations, mandates, whatever you want to say. This is very simple. It's common sense. We just need to step back and think. Why would I need a driver's license if I'm not a driver? We have the right to travel. What types of travel are there? You could travel by land, by air, and by water. How do you travel on land? Walking. You're traveling. Traveling in a car. You're traveling. Traveling on a scooter. You're not driving, you're traveling. Now, if you're a delivery driver for a pizza company, well, then you're driving. This is common sense, but they use these words to, it's deceit. It's semantic deceit. That's what they call it. It's like magic. It's like black magic because they use the spelling of words to create presumptions and assumptions. And when we don't know our rights and we don't stand on them and uphold them, then they get trespassed against. And when we're living in fear, false evidence appearing is real, right? And we think, well, we might be driving. Actually, I mean, we are technically in a car. we are technically driving. Are you technically driving? Why? Why? You got a badge on? Are you being paid right now? No. So remember, they have the ability to regulate commerce. So that's what they say. They make everybody register their car because then the state of Georgia owns your property. It's no longer your property. So when you give up your property, guess what? It's not yours anymore. You don't make the rules. Oh, you're using the state of Georgia's cars. Yeah, that means it comes with rules and regulations. Thanks for registering your car to us. Now you're our employee. Unconscionable contract. Were you told when you got a car that you had to register so that they would own it and have the ability to, apply color of law, rules, regulations, policies, procedures, codes, and all this stuff to you? No, you weren't told that. Were you told, register this car, but only for when you're, working? No, you weren't told that. When you're getting a license, did you ask why you're getting a license? Or everyone's got to do this? No, everyone's got to do this. Yeah, everyone's got to do this. Oh, everyone's got to do this? Even me, who's conducting travel and not in any way acting for higher capacity, or in any way conducting commerce on the highway in any way whatsoever? Oh, it doesn't apply to me. Even an American who has the right to travel freely and unabridged. Oh, it doesn't apply to me, but it applies to everybody else. Oh, so when you say everybody, you meant this. But you didn't say that. You said everybody. Oh, you know what I meant. See, that's why they've taught us to do this, and we even do it. So that's why we have to get back to the basics, the principles. We have to say only what we mean. Very simple. Because when we say what we mean, I like green. Oh, you know what I meant. I meant I like trees and, flowers. Well, you said you like green, so I brought you a green crayon. If I knew you liked trees and flowers, I would have went to the florist. But you said you liked green. So that's what they want us doing. They want us playing back and forth. They want us picking sides. They want us, going down all these rabbit holes and tangents, when in reality the truth is very simple, because we all have these rights and we're all being trespassed against on a daily basis, and there's no oversight. There's no checks and balances. There's no people standing up for themselves, and the ones that are being ridiculed by their neighbors who aren't doing the same, which is fine. Even us who know now, at one point we were doing the ridicule. But the best way to do it is once you know, you remember where you came from. And you treat everyone as such. Oh, they're not just, rude, obnoxious, or an asshole. They're just ignorant. Whether by choice or not, they just don't know something. For whatever reason, that information has been ignored by them. That's it. That's what ignorant means. Not a bad word. It means that for whatever reason, you've ignored that information, whether it was never brought to your attention or whether it was brought to your attention and you disregarded it. Doesn't matter. It's not a bad word. We need to stop running away from words and getting offended. Uh, you know, blaming people and crying and doing all this and all that. In reality, we just need to learn who we are, stand on it, and that's it. Protect ourselves. Very simple.